Hello guys, welcome to our podcast. My name is Milan. This is our pilot episode of our podcast, Breaking Bad Habits. Here in our podcast, we will just talk with different communities and talk about the problems that they face. And today we are talking with young people, and they're talking about the problems with climate and climate change and what is their perspective and opinion about this. Today we have two guests. We have Jovana and Matija. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone, my name is Joanna and I'm a youth activist, and mainly I'm involved with youth-related events within each topics. So today I will give a perspective of how I see that young people are or are not enough involved in these social issues. And my goal, not with this only, but with all the other activities, is to include young people in decision-making process in our future.
Thank you. And Matija?
Hello, my name is Matija. I'm a communication student, which probably means that I like talking, I like the sound of my voice and telling people why they're wrong. Also, people often say that I think I know much more than I really do, and one fun fact is that I really like bananas, of which more you'll hear later on.
Okay, we will tell that to the editing guys, just in case. So, guys, as you know, today we will talk about the environment, climate change. It's all over the news, all over the internet. You have so many sources where you can find out more about it. So, our first question of the podcast will be, do you think that we as individuals, by changing our habits, can actually influence climate change or changes in the environment? Jovana, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, I think that our habit has to change altogether, because if we change only one habit, we cannot have a different way of life or a different lifestyle. So what I believe is that if we change a set of our habits, whether daily, yearly, or just like in our group of people, we can actually have a set of habits that are new and that are providing us a whole different perspective, way of life, thinking, and when we change our habits, of course we will be able to influence the changes that were affecting us in a bad way before. So I think that one habit cannot change the whole issue we are experiencing, but if we give our efforts to change more of those, we can influence them for sure.
Okay, thank you. And Matija, what do you think? Do you think that it's more up to the individuals or up to the big corporations and governments to solve these issues?
Yeah, honestly, I do believe that one of the biggest scams when it comes to climate change in our recent history is that the corporations try to put the blame on the individuals, that we are the ones at fault because we eat too much meat, or because we don't use multiple-use bags, or that we use plastic straws, even though that it's so, even if we did change anything, it's so small on the scale of climate change catastrophes that are happening because of all the, what should I call them, mistakes that major companies make, like major oil spills, major coal burning. There's also a lot of problems with energy inefficiencies where we lose a major percentage of it because it's so inefficient. And stuff like that. And I don't really believe that we as individuals can change that by ourselves, that major change in behavior and major change in people's everyday lives have to come from the side of government in the form of different regulations. There are so many different examples of that working. Like, maybe there's this one example that's not too closely related to climate change, but illustrates my point pretty well, which is seat belts and turning on the lights when driving cars, because that was mostly seen as something that is maybe a bit of a non-macho thing to do, that, I don't need to wear a seatbelt, I'm a perfect driver, I'm not ever going to get in an accident, it's never going to happen to me. And people would just take their seatbelts, clip them behind their backs, and just sit in their seat and keep driving, until more and more accidents start appearing and more research has been done, and there has been so much data showing that seatbelts in fact do change a lot of death statistics, and that you're much more likely to survive with seatbelts. So what most governments did is put a mandate or a law which states that you have to wear seatbelts, or else you're gonna get fined, and you're gonna have to pay a lot of money, which a lot of people really can't. So you've given the people monetary incentives of why not to do certain things, and now when you think about it, it's absolutely normal for everyone to do it.
Okay, so, but tell me, in terms of you mentioned governments and you mentioned regulation, but as you know, big companies have a lot of money and they can lobby for certain things. Do you think that we as individuals can influence the decision makers in any way to push those kinds of regulations that would improve the environment?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I honestly do agree with you that the only real way we can make as individuals any sort of change, major or minor or anyhow, is to actually get involved into the decision making itself. Maybe try and do some protests, or maybe try and get into contact with our representatives personally, try writing to them, try pressuring them in any way, shape or form possible. And that these minor changes maybe can help, but it's on a scale much too small to be actually making a difference.
Yeah. Okay. So then we can go to our next question, which will be more maybe about youth work and how do you feel about young people? Do you think with all the information that we have, all the sources that we have, do you think that young people do enough to influence those changes, to change their habits, to influence decision makers? How do you feel about it, Jelena?
Well, actually, my answer will relate to the Matthias answers before, because I think that it's not all up to us. When I firstly mentioned that our habits will change the flow of the group, what I meant is only for the changes that are affecting us in a bad way. So if something is bothering me, I'll have to do it myself. But when we talk about more global things, I guess I have fair to say that education and educational institutions have to play a role within them, because young people cannot be aware, firstly, of the issues that they are a part of, because education is not telling them about them as much. I mean, all of us had, 1 or 2 classes per entire year where we learn something about ecology, something about, hot topics and everything. But the thing is that we are not actually thinking about the small things that are affecting us in everyday life. We are not thinking also about the ways how we can solve our daily bad habits. So when I think of young people, I think there is an interest, but of course they have to have an option to be interested in those topics. So I would say that education needs to include more about not only informing about the issues, but also informing about the ways that they can involve young people in. And I mean, when we talk about young people, that's a large spectrum from 16 to 30 years old, and their habits are very, very different. But there is certainly something that each one of us can do and is interested actually to do. I mean, some of the habits that we can all do is change our light bulbs in even our dormitories or our apartments to LED ones, or we can bring our textile bags when we go to the market shop, to the farmer shop. We can all buy more supplies within small shops rather than in a company shops, something like that. We can influence what gas are we using for our cars. We can also change our daily routines by using maybe more bicycles or public transport instead of private transport for the short locations and something like that. So I believe that there is an interest among young people, but we just have to show them ways and firstly introduce them with the topics that are important to know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me the very interesting point is that you mentioned was education. So what do you think? Because, usually people talk about how formal education is boring for kids, going through lessons, reading, different lessons, learning them all the time. But do you think there is a better way to do it? Like, what do you think about non-formal education? Like, how can we actually engage young people in that kind of activities?
Yeah, non-formal education is, for me, one of the best options for education in general. But what I would like to see in some near future is actually non-formal education becoming our regular education. And I would really like to see that our formal education shapes in a kind of way that wants to include people and motivates them to find their interest within their life, rather than just giving them subjects that are like for, common knowledge. Because honestly, today I have no use of knowing facts from history from the, 200 years ago, but I really have something when my teachers learn me how to publicly speak, how to deal with conflicts, just those stuff. And if we include within those topics some topics related to this podcast, like about the environmental issues and about our daily habits, I believe that all of us would have a better perspective what we need to do in order to achieve that group change in our society.
Yeah, exactly. And what about you, Mattia? How do you feel? What do you think young people should do? How will they become more aware? How can we influence them to become more interested in learning about this?
Yeah, I honestly do believe that that is kind of a really tough question to answer properly, because something that a lot of people tend to forget is the fact that people have a very, very limited amount of time and energy. Meaning that people usually have a lot of their own issues, troubles with work, with cooking, with transit, with chores in general, that they feel very much drained and, frustrated because of the lack of enough free time for them to relax, to actually think about those things. And maybe even more in environments such as Serbia, where there is so much of a pressure and insecurity in the future, whether financial, social, or whatever, that makes it hard for them to think about some troubles and some problems that are going to happen, at least they think, in like 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100 years from now. So that's kind of what makes them tough. But I honestly do believe that one of the answers for that question, one of the solutions for that very problem, is what you suggested, like education that comes from schools. For a lot of people, most of their knowledge comes from schools, pretty much. I mean, it's kind of something that you have to go to, you passively absorb the knowledge, maybe even actively. I don't know, I was mostly a passive listener. I didn't study that much. So that is one way of changing it. Mostly because grown people are the hardest people to change, actually. They have their own way of thinking, and to actually put enough energy and to put enough resources to change their opinions, it's going to be very little returns in that investment. While the kids are much more open to such new ideas and much more open to learning the new world from new angles, because they just don't have enough knowledge as grown people do. Of course, there is this one little problem with this way of thinking, is that perhaps do we really have enough time for such a thing? Because even if we do start talking to children and trying to educate them, it's going to take like 20 years for them to start to get into any way or form, into any position of power where they can start changing those things.
Yeah. I think that's a very pessimistic outcome.
I mean, it is kind of, I must admit it.
Yeah, but I just wanted to add something, since we are here around all of this topic. Like, do you believe like that initiatives like SDG and Erasmus Plus can actually influence anything like this?
Yeah, I believe so, and I would really like to continue on the topic that Mattia was talking about, because once I heard a sentence that made me realize what we actually need to do, and the sentence goes like this, that once your basic needs are satisfied, you will actually look further. So when you mentioned the hard systems and the financial and economical instability, we actually see that once our basic needs are satisfied, we will look further, and we will want to upgrade our mental health. We will want to take care more about the environment. We will reconsider changing everything in our house to be, eco-friendly and everything. So actually, what we need to do is to include people more in how to upgrade their basic needs as well. And the systems are playing really important role there. I mean, if we cannot change the entire system, or like the things that are regulated by the government, what I believe that we need to do is also to provide people that are working with kids and young people, like teachers, also with a different kind of knowledge. So Erasmus Plus would be a great solution for them, because Erasmus Plus is not only for the youth. We also have courses that are connected to the teachers and higher education students. So yeah, I believe that would be a really nice option.
If I may add something, that very thing that I was talking about and you mentioned has a name. It's called the pyramid of needs, where for the person, a single, how do I call it? Yeah, certain person to try and actually fulfill some of the more advanced needs, like needs for education, needs for enrichment, needs for change of planet or whatever, for betterment, they first need to fulfill the basic needs of shelter, of water, of food, and some sort of financial stability. So honestly, the only way to fix that would be much, much harder to do than any of the basic stuff we can do right now, because it's a very, very different, deep and complicated topic of economics.
Okay. Yeah, we went into the uncertain future territory, I think, with this podcast. So about all of that, I would like to maybe add another question before we finish. So tell me, do you think that there is a way for us like to connect better with nature, like the urban life, the capitalism, everything like made us so closed off in the cities, in the, like the asphalt, the cars, driving, craziness, like, do you think that connecting with nature would help us protect the environment better? What do you think, Mattia?
Honestly, I think it would, because there was this very interesting and perhaps a bit pessimistic story of bananas. Have you ever eaten any banana tasting candy and thought about, wait, it doesn't taste anything like a banana? Or have you ever had like your grandparents or parents telling you how, back in my day, bananas were much, much sweeter? And that is actually very, very true. There was actually a whole different kind of banana that was called Gros Michel, which was very, very different. But what happened? There was this major disease outbreak in Panama that targeted specifically bananas. And pretty much the only kind of banana that survived is the one that we have right now. This kind of not very sweet, very yellow banana that's called Cavendish. So you're constantly, when eating a banana and tasting candy, you're having a bit of history in your mouth at that moment. But the point of this being that it's happening yet again. There's this really, really big chance, not even chance, like it's almost certain that in like 20 years' time, something that we take so much for granted, like a banana, a very common, very widespread fruit that many people eat for breakfast or whatever, is going to disappear, and there's pretty much nothing we can do about it right now. As some people say, that train has left the station. There's no way we can actually get it. But that can also only be a cautionary tale for us, to actually be able to take this example of things that have gone wrong or will go wrong in the very near future, and actually start doing something to prevent more of such examples happening in our lives.
Jovana, what about you? How do you feel about this topic?
Yeah, I agree with Mattia that as we are unaware of disappearance of banana pretty soon, we are unaware of the disappearance of most of the things around us each day, because we are not actively engaged with it. But if you involve a new habit in your life, that would be to have outdoor activity in, for example, 1 month. For each of the national parks in your country or your local community, you would actually be more involved in the changes that are around you. So I don't know how he found out about the bananas, but for example, in the park where I like to run in Vojvodina, I was one morning running, and I make a break, and there were some people that were living around the park, and they told me a story about the lizards that are gonna disappear like in a few years, and their last species are right there in that park. And it kept me thinking about the lizards, you know. So I guess that if we change our habits, as I mentioned earlier, and to involve some healthier lifestyle in general, we would actually be more aware of the changes that are connected to the environment and the climate issues. So, yeah, I'm definitely up for connecting with nature, and for me the best thing to do is like sit on next to the river, on the sea, enjoy the waves, the sounds, to read a good book, to do one meditation or something like that. And I would definitely recommend that to everyone who hasn't tried it.
Yeah, definitely. I think like living in big cities, you know, like we disconnect from nature. We go on our 9 to 5 on our commute, and we completely forget what is around us. We are not aware of what is happening around us. So yeah, definitely being in nature, seeing what the nature is doing, how it is adapting to everything that is happening, I think it's something that is really, really important. And for the end, for our listeners, to justify the name of our podcast, Breaking Bad Habits, would you like to give one bad habit that you think our listeners can maybe change in their life?
Well, I can list one of mine.
Okay.
Well, I was using too much commercial products like hair shampoo, like deodorants and something like that. And I realized that beside that I'm giving money to literally people that have a lot of them, I'm actually using really bad products, and especially toothpastes. I don't know if you ever looked in the like containing of things in the toothpaste, but all of them are actually the same. So that is the same for the shampoos or washing gels and everything. So what I would suggest is to just browse through your Instagram, find your local guy or girl that are making nature and homemade products for like cosmetic products, and definitely switch to them.
Yeah.
Because not that you're only supporting small businesses, you're actually using something that you could make by yourself, but you don't have time. The content of those products are so simple, everyone can understand them, and we can even find it in our environment, like in our communities, so you for sure know that they are, you know, not just natural, but like they're from this type of, like from your region. And for me, that's one of the best changes that I have started doing recently. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Supporting small businesses, supporting our community is something that can really bring us all closer and bring us together. What about you, Mattia?
Well, given that I'm bald, I honestly can't relate to the shampoo thing, but never mind. Something I can relate to, and something that I would suggest to a lot of people, is actually trying to try and use cars as little as possible. Because if it's available to you, if there is a decent public transit system in your city or your local area, try using it a bit more. It's not that terrible as you may think. It may be just a little bit less comfortable than your car, but it really does make a massive change, not just for the environment, but for the commute time for a lot of people. And that would be my one suggestion for this.
And also you don't have to search for parking.
Yeah, that's also a major thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, guys, that would be it for today. Thank you so much for joining us in our pilot episode of our podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something new, and see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.